everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Too Much Music Podcast. I'm Allison.
I'm Greg.
And that's Greg. And we are here to delight and astound you with our wit and wisdom about music. I'm just kidding. Mm-hmm. We're basically just going to BS our way through this. So hope you enjoy it. I know we will. Greg, how you been doing?
I am good. It has been a while, and my studio has continued to undergo many changes. And I've got a lot to talk about with that. I think I want to kind of head in that direction today, because the way you work has a lot to do with what you make. So anyway, I want to talk about that, and that's what I've been focused on in this room. I've rebuilt the room, actually, with the help of a contractor. I'm not that gifted. Replaced the ceiling, did a whole gutting of this room, total reorganization, rewiring. Thanks to your inspiration, as a matter of fact, I have videos on my Dr. Cynthia Pants channel that talk about this. But anyway, yeah, we can get more into that. But everything's great. But there's a lot of adjustment, I'd say, that I'm doing. So
yeah,
how about yourself?
Cool. You know, things should be good. Everything is on the surface good. You know, there's a roiling undercurrent of trauma right now, just in society. So we're going to try to not talk about that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, but other than that, all is well. I'm always, you know, chasing away entropy at a breakneck pace. But yeah, no, my studio is in super good shape right now. And actually, I just realized today that this is the first early summer for years that I haven't, for whatever reason, just felt the need to totally revamp my studio. Like I'm not changing it at all.
Because it's right. It's really good.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's now I'm able to make music in the room without the computer, which I imagine we're going to talk about quite a bit today. And I'm also now, you know, thanks in large part to your inspiration, I'm now running Linux all the time for everything, including audio. Yeah.
Yeah, you are. You're probably running one of the most intense and advanced, certainly for a hobbyist, Linux studios that there is, in terms of the number of channels you have access to, the quality of those channels, et cetera. I mean, you're pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I have a 32 channel system, pretty much kicking ass, and yeah, running Debian 12. There's nerdy stuff that we can talk about if we end up down that road. But
on that road, you know, we're going there.
Yeah, if you're a casual music listener, folks,
move on.
You might not enjoy that part.
Go talk about summer music festivals somewhere else. That's not happening here.
No, we're not going to talk about that. We'll just be talking about Linux kernels and, yeah, I don't know, VSTs, whatever. Probably actually won't talk about VSTs at all. I don't know. I got some stuff to say about plugins and Linux. Maybe we'll get there.
Okay. Well, where do you want?
Why don't you tell me about what your creative process is right now in your studio and why you set up your studio the way you have? I mean, I find it especially... So, listener, Greg and I used to be married. We're not anymore, but we talk all the time. And I know everything about his studio. So I may be pretending to ask questions that I don't know the answer to, but I do know the answer to them already.
Okay.
However, I am interested in hearing about, and I think it would be interesting for the listeners to hear about, you know, exactly why you chose. So you have a system where you have a Tascam, what's called a Tascam Studio Bridge. And that's how you do your recording. You're not recording into your computer. You're also a Linux user, but you're generally not, you're not connecting your instruments to your computer in any, you know, remotely normal way. So why don't you maybe just describe how your studio works?
Sure.
And then we'll talk about why.
Very briefly, as you can see, depending on how tightly this shot is cropped, you can see that there are some very old analog instruments in the studio from the 70s. In fact, on both sides of me, I've got 78, 77, and earlier than that, the ARP. Okay, 2600. Anyway, I've got old instruments, vintage instruments, for a number of reasons that I would like to get into. But the way that all works is they all go to a patch bay that then goes to a modern mixing desk, a small but modern mixing desk. And then all that can go, and I can route up to 24 simultaneous channels from anything into this Tascam Studio Bridge, which is essentially a tape recorder. Nothing more, except doesn't use tape, of course. It's a digital recorder. Records to a little SD disc. So I've never pressed record on the DAW, and even though I have Mixbus, which is a Linux DAW, I think it's a really good DAW for me. I've never pressed record and written anything to it. Okay, so when I've tracked something on the Studio Bridge, I then take that SD disk, stick it in the machine in the Linux box, drag those tracks over, and I do any mixing I'm going to do in the DAW after that, which is usually very, very minimal, which has a lot to do with the kinds of things you might do differently when you have a studio like this, when it's what you see is what you get, and it's a press record, and there you have it. You think differently, you play differently, you orchestrate differently. Your ideas come out different because you know that you're not going to fix it in the box, and you're not going to sit and try on 35 earth-shatteringly different plugins or whatever. That's not how that works. You're getting what you're getting. You're printing.
Right. So that approach is something that we've both come to recently. I do it a little bit differently, but I think it's where we really converge is, I just don't want to be working on music in the computer basically at all.
Mm-hmm. How did yours work differently though than mine in terms of your process?
Well, first of all, I do use, so I have a big mixing board, again, depending on how tight the shot is, it's right here. It's a 32 channel mixing board, analog board, which I love. It's a Midas Venice, absolutely incredible sounding. I use the EQs.
The good vintage that was it designed in England, built in Germany, whatever. It's really good.
Yeah, I think this one was actually designed and built in England before so Behringer bought, this is for people who might not know, I know we both know, because we've talked about it, but Behringer bought Midas in the early 2000s, maybe toward, I don't know exactly what year, maybe toward 2010. Before that, they were their own, UK company, had a great reputation, made super high quality stuff. And I'm not saying the new Midas stuff is bad, but this old stuff is just it's very different.
Demonstrably different, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's a great sounding mixer, and everything in my studio runs into that mixer through a patch bay. But after that, it's going through converters and directly into the DAW. So I don't have any external recording solution like you. Like you have the Studio Bridge, you don't even have to turn your computer on to record. And frankly, I'm kind of jealous of that because, I do not have to have my computer on anymore to play music in here, which is just absolutely, I don't know, for me, like earth-shatteringly life-changing and awesome. And I've thought a lot about why that is. And I think there are two reasons, and I'm curious what you think about this. I think reason one is, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer, as most people do, during my workday. I do work in this, Greg and I have a company together. We're self-employed, so we work from home, both of us. And I work from this studio. I work from this chair that I'm sitting in, just like when I'm making music, I'm in the same room. And so I think being in front of the computer sort of puts me in that work zone a little bit. I sort of resent it, I think most people do. And, the second reason is it doesn't matter what operating system I use. It doesn't matter what software I use. There is always dicking around when a computer is involved. Something always gets weird. Something always goes wonky. Something doesn't work the way you expect. You're routing something the wrong way. There's latency. It could be any number of issues. And that just absolutely pulls me out of my music making flow. And that to me it's the devil. That's what I don't want. So is that like kind of similar to why you don't want to use a computer?
Partially. I want to sort of, maybe we can really get into the nitty gritty as it is now. So I think there are two things to consider, because I listen to a lot of music podcasts and whatnot, and I hear a lot of the synth tube and the synth gear stuff. Synth gear? Gear tube. Gear tube, thank you. So yeah, so I think what's commonly not addressed is that there are working musicians. We both have been professional musicians in our past lives, and I've done personally I've done a ton of different kinds of gigs. And when you're doing that sort of stuff, you need instant recall, you need all the modern tricks and tools. That's what everybody's asking for. It goes on and on and on. So for those folks, and it's not usually differentiated, and it really should be, there are tools for professional people with deadlines and clients that they have to serve. That is one way of working and being. To them, obviously, and you see it too with especially with the more successful film and TV composers. Like, they have beautiful studios full of wonderful gear that they don't use in their productions very often unless they have the
Right.
staff, and they love the gear. It's not, but they can't. That's not how that works. Those changes come, fast and furious and all that kind of stuff. So we're not talking
So when
about
you
that.
say instant recall, you mean, and this is I would say the number one best quality about making music on a computer, that you open your session back up and assuming you did everything in any kind of reasonable way, it is exactly what you left. So you hit play. Yep. And it sounds exactly like what you did before. That's what you're saying, right?
Yep. You hand the cue over to the production team, and it is what it is. When they come back 2 weeks or 2 months later and they say, I need it to be 3 seconds shorter, or get rid of that stupid accordion you put in there, you can pull it right back up and dump it out, and it will be the same as, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's a big deal. And we're not talking about that kind of flow. We're talking about what I guess you would be left with are the hobbyists. So even though we are very serious musicians and we have been professional musicians both, we're now hobbyists, I suppose. We're not being paid to do that by choice. So, sorry, I had to interject that just to be clear about the flow and how that affects things, because it's something that I think isn't often addressed. So, sorry, what was the original question? It was...
Well, I was just asking you. I mean, you did actually answer it. That was that was not vestigial. That was core to the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting. And because so Greg has, in his past life, done a lot more professional performing and composing than I have. So I was, really teaching music theory, and then I had a band, which was never moneymaker. So Greg's experience, just for context, is very different, like professional theater work, lots of composing for media, all the stuff that you kind of end up putting together if you need to make money performing and composing music. So yeah, that makes sense. And that's not something that I really think about too much, but I think the concept of what happens when you have to come into your studio and it's a new place every time. Right? I mean, I think that's really interesting. Like, that's something I've been really, I wouldn't say struggling with it, because it's actually really fun for me. I like it feeling fresh every time. And so I'll give you an example. So my studio has, a lot of samplers and a lot of synthesizers. I also play guitar and sing. And I have a lot of hardware effects that I use. So all of these things, it's a pretty complex studio. I have multiple MIDI routers, everything can touch everything. I have a huge patch-based setup. I really can do my routing every time, and I use all of these tools, and I put the pieces together in different ways almost every time I come in the studio. It'll be a different set of, basically a different orchestration, a different instrumentation. And I can save some things, like, you can see behind me the Tempest, right? That's one of my favorite drum machines. I love that thing. And, if I've got something going on it, I, of course, will save, I'll save a patch, like I'll save a project. So that would have the sounds and the beats that I made or whatever in it. But then I have, 20 other instruments, and I might be using 5 at the same time, let's say.
Well, I'd go further and say that your Tempest routing, however you routed it when you recorded something, I mean, you've got individual outs, and you can change a whole lot of that. So dialing that back or getting it back.
That's right. And that's true of every single piece of gear in here, basically. In one way or another, it completely changes based on how you set it up that day, based on what effects you route it to. So what I've been doing, because of all of this complexity, what I've been doing is just embrace instead of thinking of, I'm making a track, I'm making a song, I'm making a piece of music, the way I've been thinking about it since I got my studio like this, and what I'm really loving, is I'm making an environment for myself to make music in. So if I save a patch on the Tempest, that's not because I'm expecting to really do the same thing again, right?
Yep.
It's that little piece is a piece that I want to use again for some reason.
Okay.
Right? And it may be that I use it in a totally different context next time. It may be a different tempo. It may sound totally different. I may change it. I may grab the sounds and scrap the beat. And then I, may add 7 different instruments that I didn't use the time before when I used that particular beat. So essentially having little stations and having little bits and pieces that I can grab, samples that I make with my synthesizers. Like, I'm more likely to sample a synthesizer these days than to play an entire 4-minute synthesizer part, which is actually very different from what you do. So I'm really coming at it more like it's not always beat driven for sure, but it's coming at it more from that direction, like a beat driven electronic music studio that's sequenced.
Oh.
But you do something very different from that.
Yep. And I'd like to address some of the things you just said about your own setup here. So I think this is stuff that's so on my mind for so many reasons. Okay. So let's take the Tempest. It is an instrument designed by some prolific instrument builders and designers and makers. And so, okay.
Designed by Dave Smith and Roger Lynn.
Yep.
So 2 of the most epic, one of the most epic synthesizer makers and the ultimate drum machine maker of all time designed this thing together.
And
very interesting.
It's arguably an unfinished product. It doesn't matter. The point is that the way that the thing was built and conceived and designed and how you interact with it is unique, extremely unique. No one has copied it quite. And it invites and demands a certain way of approaching what you're making. That will change what you do with it. It changes how the sounds how you're going to interact and build sounds. As a composer, you're trained, imagine the limitless possibility of sounds and come and find that sound. Okay. Well, gear doesn't quite work that way. No instrument really does work that way. Composers like to talk about it this way, but the truth of the matter is you pick up a violin. Yes, there's a billion things you can do with it and all sorts of modern extended techniques. Cool. But there are limits to what you can do with that thing. It just will never get any louder or softer than it is. The acoustics will change where it is, how it works in context with other things, etc. forever. These instruments are exactly the same way. And what I've been doing on my YouTube channel recently is picking a piece of gear and diving deep into it to essentially, especially the vintage stuff, to uncover, because modern synths, frankly, are just really fancy Linux computers, and that's wonderful too, lots of power. But these older pieces are not that at all. They are stuck and limited. So again, this gets to, if I were a pro and need to go on stage, I would be playing the Moog Subsequent 37 constantly. That's all I would have. It is the perfect blend of modern and analog, modern convenience and functionality and old sound.
And it always performs the same way when you do a certain thing.
Yep.
It's very consistent.
Can save it all, right? It all recalls instantly, regardless of what the front panel looks like or says. And and you'll get it guaranteed. It'll be in tune. There's a billion things that are going on there, and that's wonderful. But if you're a hobbyist and you want to explore, you take one of these old guys, and you're limited to whatever these knobs are going to do, whatever patch cords you're going to have in there, and that's wildly, and the function that they produce, like the filter, for example, the architecture of it is going to give you a specific sound. There are limits, hard limits to that sound. You may or may not be able to modulate the filter wildly in some way or another, and therefore this. In your current moment, you're not going to be able to do that sound on this instrument. So you find other ways to express yourself, just like you would on a flute. And there are powerful versions of that. There are less powerful. And both of those, I have a Poly 800. It's one of the Korg's cheap. It was like the first, everybody could have a guitar, cheap synths, and it sounds like a toy, but it is beautiful because of the limitations of it. It's got this funny divide down oscillator, which so it's really a monophonic synth that they made paraphonic, really, and it's got all kinds of funny things. All of this is a tool that you use to do something interesting with if you do it right. So if I show up with the MS-20 behind me here and I expect it to respond like the Moog, the Subsequent 37 does, I'm I'm an idiot. The
Yep.
keyboard is a bunch of switches. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have velocity or aftertouch or anything. And I certainly can't hook up.
Yeah, there's just like a hamster inside of it, basically.
Well, it's like a light switch. Every key is like a dumb light switch. Same with the CS30, which is one of the most powerful monosynths Yamaha ever. It is the most powerful monosynth Yamaha ever built. But it is also a dumb keyboard. And so to create or expect, so the limitations of these instruments and their interfaces does a lot to inform how you interact with them, and therefore the music you make. And I think that is a wonderful challenge that you have to embrace if you're going to do it. Otherwise, just get Serum, which is a synthesizer BSD plugin, and go to town. You have no limits to what you can do. It's a cheap piece of software.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is something that I think about a lot when I hear you talk about music, that I think is important conceptually to what you just said. So and again, it's just context. So you have a double doctorate from Eastman, which is one of the greatest music schools of all time, which only is to say that you worked super hard in a super intense musical environment to do this. But it's not just in composition or just in performance, it's in both, which is, at that level, not super uncommon. But or is it? Most composers at Eastman are also.
It's half and half, but it's very common out in the world for sure.
But anyway, you have a double doctorate in piano and music composition. That's the important bit to know, which means, when you say, when I talk to composers, like people who are really, really in that lane about instruments, they're thinking of how they're performed, but they don't have the physical experience.
They treat them like opcodes, okay? So
exactly.
In a piece of code, they sort of think, this is what you put in, this is what you can get out. Oh, but I know Sarah, and she does this other cool thing, so I can hand this to Sarah, and she'll do this cool thing, and that's fine. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a totally fine way to do it, but it's very different from what you do because, I mean, first of all, let's note that you're only writing for music today pretty much for instruments that you're going to perform on.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
I think that's why you've always loved synthesizer music and electronic music, is that you love to perform and you have a very particular way you want to do things, and you just know you can do it, and so you just do it all. That's my impression. Is that, first of all, is that accurate?
That was true as a kid. Again, I'm as a not tiny baby, as a small child, I had instruments or tape recorders with me, and I was just alone in my basement. That's what I did. That's how many people start. But I never really got along with ensembles and that kind of thing. It wasn't for me. Too many wild cards, and they all seemed a little unnecessary and a little old-fashioned, frankly, if I'm honest. So, yes, this is how I've approached it, and now I live alone on a mountain doing the same thing.
Yeah. When you start making music in your studio, so, I run a lot of sequences, and again, I do, it's not, everything is not sequenced and everything is certainly not quantized, but in general, my music is more in the loopy music realm. Like, here goes a sample, and it's going to repeat often. I love loopers, I love sequencers. But when you record music today, what you typically are doing is, like, recording the full, it's more of an old school approach. You're recording, you sit at a keyboard, you imagine the other parts, you record the entirety of one part, and then you go back and multi-track, you layer as if you're in a multi-track recording studio, but it's just all one dude doing it. Isn't that kind of what you're doing?
Yes, but this is where the struggle and where the conversation, I hope, gets really interesting, because there are limits to that. Right. So if you're going to, and I've done a bunch of this, it's gregwilder.com. You can find examples. There's lots of music there. You can find examples of this, but you'll see there are, I don't know if we want to do like a tour or some of this, but there are tracks where that's exactly what's happened. Is I've pulled out the Roland JX3P and played for 7 minutes and then remembered what I just did. Try not to let the dogs or anything else interrupt me. And then I can start to layer things, and of course I'm hearing it again as I do that. Then there's the other side where I've got the Haypax sitting here. I don't know if it's in the shot, but I've got the Haypax sitting here, which is it's an amazing device for many, many reasons. Got you to get one, and yeah. You're sold. But here's the thing. It definitely, you cannot press record and just walk away or keep going, right? It has hard limits to the length of what you're going to do in a single take. So you would have to build these things. I have two ways of doing it, and it's tough because neither of those are really what I do. And as I'm trying to kind of suggest, I'm at my age now in who I really am and who I have been and who I've worked to become. So I'm really not interested. That's another, I think, important thing about the hobbyist privilege, I suppose, which is, I don't have to do things to a spec or to someone else's. So, but I am having struggles where I want to sit down and compose a piece of music, or at least get real close to and I do this a lot now. I write essentially, they are almost scores. I couldn't just hand them always to someone else and they get it because they're not fully, that's a whole nother set of skills. And it's a lot of time that goes into turning something from something I get. It's like it's 60% ready up to 90% ready. No. So I stick with the 60% detailed score sketch, and then I can sit down at the instrument and realize those things as a performer. But it's a strange, but I don't know. That's where I'm heading with all of this, I think, is building music with a combination of the short clips and the long stretches, but also using paper to organize thoughts. That makes sense?
It does. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, I think this is where our very different histories are super obvious.
And because
I mean, it's really simple. I am not good at composing music. I can do it. I have done it.
Yeah. When you say you're not good at it, do you mean it doesn't feel? I think you are good at it.
I mean, it's not where I'm at my best. And what I mean by that is, I'm very capable of, I have a very good musical imagination. Like I can do complex things, as most musicians can, with music in my head. So it's not that I can't imagine things that don't exist. It's that doing that doesn't produce my best music. Like, honestly, that's not how it works best for me. I mean, I guess I would say I'm more of an improviser. And when it's not like, that's not,
Thank God.
I'm not talking that.
We don't need to hear that.
I know how much you love bebop, but it's that like, it's that the embodiment, the actual act of making music with my body, whether it's my voice or my hands or whatever, is where ideas come from for me. They don't just, I mean, this actually speaks more to just how different brains work than anything, which is something that might be really interesting for us to talk about at some point. But I have I don't know what you call it. It's a condition. It's not a disability, but it's a weird brain thing. That's the technical term for it. It's called aphantasia, and I don't see things in my head at all. And even though I can hear things, in general, people with this condition kind of have an empty head most of the time. Like my head is pretty much just like, just smoke, nothing happening. And I think that's probably why.
Tumbleweed.
Like, I need to hold the guitar.
Could we say that because you are incredibly brilliant, you have achieved tremendous things in academics, which typically require what?
Thank you.
Which typically require being able to hold things in memory in particular ways. I mean, so you have, what I'm trying to get to is that your coping skills on this front are so tremendous that no one would really know. In fact, you exceed what most people can do anyway. And then, but isn't it your intuition kind of that steps in?
I guess, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure.
You have to just you have to feel it. You have to see.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Well, I think for most people, probably when it comes down to actually trying to express how you think, that sort of breaks down real fast, right?
It does. I had
I mean,
synesthesia. I've had it my whole life. I had no idea until I was in college because I just assumed you don't talk about how you know red
how
is
you
red,
think.
obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and this is what what made me interested in music cognition, during my PhD, and why I went that route, because I do find it very fascinating how music and the brain interact. I mean, it's, to me, one of the most miraculous things in the world for all kinds of reasons. But for me personally, and again, it's very personal, I really need to be touching an instrument or singing. That's how I compose. I think it probably is pretty similar to a composition process, because once that happens, there's a lot of machinations that I go through to do, pretty complex things. So it's not like whatever comes out comes out. It's like all of the pieces need to come out. And this is why I make solo music a lot. All of the pieces need to come out in their own way and in their own time with my body. I don't know how else to say it.
I would like to just caveat or tangent here to the instruments you have in your studio. I happen to know what's behind you there, even if it's off camera. So, for example, and what you've had and what you've sold. So you had a Waldorf Iridium, and that is a beautiful instrument. It's so powerful. It's a little Linux box, as we were talking about. It's a modern, hyper-powerful Linux box. So many different things you can do. And it's got an incredible interface. Lots of knobs per function and a beautiful touchscreen that's reactive. So good. So good. Brilliant design. But to navigate the complexity of that instrument takes a lot of internal abstraction, I think. I have a Quantum, so I it's the same thing, basically. Yeah. So I know it takes a lot. You have to think almost like a coder and abstract stuff. And you sold that and you bought an Udo Super Gemini, which has no screen.
It's way more my speed.
It has no screen at all. And it's got 1 billion knobs on it. Sliders, really. And
I'm basically like a baby. Like, I just need pure immediacy.
Total tactile.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I mean, glorious. I mean, it sounds better than the Iridium, I think. But anyway.
Well, if I talk about my favorite instruments, that is definitely the thing they have in common. Like, honestly, when I had my band in the 2000s, I drug around a Fender Rhodes for years. Like the actual, and we were gigging all the time. And my poor bandmates, I did buy the van, like, this was my choice, but my setup was ridiculous. And it was because I wanted I just felt like that's what I needed. And you and I have talked about this so much, and you used to not understand this. Like, I need, in fact, one of these days I'll buy a Rhodes again. Right now I use the little Yamaha CP, which is like a tiny version of a Rhodes and a Whirly. It sounds like very real.
Very real. It responds in a very real way. But the thing is that key bed does not feel anything like striking those tines, of course.
No, and that's an interesting, that's an interesting difference in you and me. For me, well, I'm not 20%, I'm not 5% of the keyboard player that you are. Like, I can play, I can do things. I was a music theorist. I had to be able to read scores. And
with the Fender Rhodes in particular, you don't have to be a player to like poke at those keys and get very, very complex sounds, and you feel that in your finger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, for me, it's weirdly, I'm sitting here saying it's about embodiment and tactile, but it's actually not in the same way that a great pianist is doing it. I mean, I love...
Okay, I mean that, because it's not the knob per function kind of thing?
Well, it's not per function, but the actual... I guess it's the key bed. I'm not that picky about that. That's the basic thing I'm saying.
Most people are, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because most people can't do what a great professional level pianist can do with a key bed, including myself. Like, that level of detail is not something that I'm going to ever... you can't do that without spending your 10,000 hours or whatever bullshit.
Put a pin in that, because there's something important I want to mention about that, but go ahead. Sorry.
Shit. No. Let's talk about it.
Oh, well,
I don't have anything else.
I was just going to say this. This is one of those things. I kind of have a bunch of mantras coming out of these podcasts, I think, because they're things that have been brewing in me for a long time. This is one of them, that there are brilliantly talented sound designers out there. They make the the factory. There are no factory presets. There's no factory. These are just YouTubers that get paid. Not all YouTubers, but they get people who get paid to. I can name names, but Howard Scar, Manny Fernandez. There are experienced technical people who get paid to build sounds for these things. Okay, and they become factory presets. And as we all know with the DX7, and there's a glorious interview and podcast with one of the two people who, it's on the ProSynth network. It's one of the two people who built the original sound banks for the Yamaha DX7. They ended up with, even though they had a long time to get to know how the FM synthesis worked on a prototype that really didn't function well, at the end of the day, they had 2 weeks to build these patches. They did an incredible job for what they ended up doing because those patches changed.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that the DX7 patches that are like
the legendary
every 80s song is, based on basically like every hook?
It's
all of these. It's 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it was an American and a British guy. They were sent to Japan, and it got to a point. Anyway, there's so many great stories about it where they were like holed up in a building in a little room, and these Japanese guys in Yamaha were just bringing them food and sake, and it's a whole thing. But
I bet they were freaking out because, if you've ever used a DX7 at all, that it's number one, it's so hard to program, and number two, that type of synthesis was literally, brand new, and nobody knew what anything was going to do when they did something, right? That's crazy. I didn't know that.
My understanding, and I'm paraphrasing here, and it's really a fascinating thing, but there are operator algorithms that can be set up to simulate a saw wave, for example, right? Even though it's all sine wave based. And so, or even a squarish wave or whatever. So there were ways, the DX7 has no filter. So there are ways to attenuate all of this or set it up and then attenuate the operators and their ratio, their FM ratios to approximate these sorts of things. So that gave them a start into some things, right? And they had again, a prototype. I think they had a 2-operator prototype or something that they had for a couple of years, but none of the real interface or the real power of the DX7. So suddenly they were sat down in front of a almost finished DX7, and they had just a couple of weeks to do this. They sent it out, and those sounds changed pop music forever. Yeah. But since then, people have become very proficient at programming these things, and there are sound banks that are stunningly, realistic and interesting, that go far beyond the typical sounds. Anyway, sound designers build sounds, but a lot of them aren't players. Those two guys weren't real. Well, one of them actually was a performer. Actually, that's not true in the DX7 case, but mostly they're not. And when I say that, I don't mean they can't hack away at a keyboard. I mean that they don't have. So when you think of a pianist, one of the things that you're really learning is, for example, how to connect and create legato phrases. And so you watch people change fingering on the same note sometimes if you watch real carefully, right? Or you see that, you play an octave with your thumb and your fourth finger because you're gonna connect this way. Which is not something that most people would tend to do. Does that make sense? You might have some odd fingering choices. I don't know what I'm doing this in the air for, but you might have some odd fingering choices that are really designed to create a connection. So when you get to the end of something with your thumb and you need to keep going, you're going to do this, right? To allow for a legato connection. Anyway, my point is that's the sort of thing you really do at an advanced piano level. And why that matters is when you're playing one of these old vintage instruments that are just simple off and on switches of their key bed, you have to create those tendencies with the ways in which you build the envelopes and the ways in which you create motion within the patch itself. And so that, and the way you re-trigger, that's one of the biggest things, okay? So by re-triggering, I mean, if you continue to play a legato passage where you're not really letting up and restarting the filter envelope, right? You can get a sound, and then you can make quite a impression if you let go and re-trigger the filter, if you have it set correctly. Right,
and most synthesizers have some sort of built-in control for that, because that's something that keyboard players for a very long time have been using. The difference between a legato phrase and now that's just a basic premise of phrasing. Like, we're connecting things, and now we stop connecting things and we start something new. So that was an opportunity for synthesizer makers, to And this is where it gets interesting when you think about the early synthesizer makers, and in particular Bob Moog, working with someone, a player of the caliber of Wendy Carlos. There's a reason he chose to work with her, and it wasn't just because that was a cool marketing thing to do. It was because he knew that he didn't have those basic principles of performance at his fingertips, so he needed someone who did, so they could help him, kind of make those decisions. But it is interesting, and here's a question for you, because most people, myself included, are not Wendy Carlos. I would say, I'm a better keyboard player. This is a newsflash for everyone. Most people are not Wendy Carlos.
I was going to say, there's probably only one.
There's only one. No, but what I mean is most people who might be listening to this are not as good a player as Wendy Carlos, and they're not as good a player as you. Not in terms of their music making, but in terms of their keyboard abilities, because that's, again, something you can't fake that. Like, that takes, a lot of work to build. A lot of lessons, a lot of, very specific types of practicing. It's something I don't really have. And so I'm curious what you think about, like, what would your advice be for people who don't have that piano background, that really intensive keyboard background, to make use of these, these tools? Or how can we make our synthesizer playing better?
I would say there's a sensitivity and a certain kind of listening that needs to be developed there. So again, the folks who are building sounds are very talented, very smart individuals. I'm not taking anything away here, but what I would say is those sound packs, I've bought some of them for different polysynths, and they're useless to me.
They don't work for you,
because they're designed to go clunk, and then magic happens, but you can't control it. Yeah. You're not and they just don't react. Some do, but it's rare. It's super rare. Your steam pipe behind you, is one of those instruments that forces you in a way, and this as a wind player, so you didn't mention that you are a wind player and that you control it, and it was designed with the inventor's daughter, I think, who's a wind player. Anyway, it's designed to react to all these different other inputs, which just changes the game and changes the expressiveness of that thing. If you played that steam pipe, I'm sure with my midied up CS30, which is just an on-off switch, it would be pretty dumb.
It's very boring without expressivity.
Yeah, and then you add so that expressiveness isn't naturally going to happen on the keyboard, and it's not happening if you can't play, and you're not going to program for it if you're not playing. So how do I would say that there's a certain kind of learning and attention, maybe, that you don't have to be a virtuoso to understand. It could be some, maybe, okay, now I'm going to be an asshole. I'm going to say, if these folks would take a couple of piano lessons, and I don't mean piano lessons like let's learn to play Beethoven. I mean like piano lessons with real pianists with the goal of very particularly learning what are some of these keyboard, and I bet.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you, because so you and I have been together / not together in various ways for 15 years now? Long time. And
17, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have given me literally one 10-minute piano lesson, and it has been the best thing that happened for my playing. We should probably do that again. Yeah. And here's what you showed me. Like, I'll just share, with people what that was like. And I don't think you can get the full effect of it without the physicality, but I think I can basically encapsulate what what I took from it, which was, I have always been this is true with my writing too, my handwriting. I've always been a wrist and fingers person, right? Wrist and fingers. Like, I'm very dexterous with my fingers. There's a lot of that in guitar. Maybe that's one reason I like guitar. It's a very finger-driven left-hand technique. And of course, saxophone too, which was probably the best instrument I'm best at, is there's not a lot. I mean, you do with your body, but not when you're actually changing notes. It's really just coming from your fingers. And that's how I've always played keyboards too. And you sat down with me at the piano, and you forced me to bring my shoulders and my arms into the process, which is very hard. And in fact, I tried a similar thing with handwriting. I understand that, I mean, I can't draw, I'm not an artist, but I understand that artists draw with their shoulders and with their full arm. And it's similar in piano playing, that you need power coming from your arms into your hands and wrists, all the way down, and that's how you gain control. And And you showed me how that might work and how I might connect notes better and how I might change my hand position to achieve this. And I'm not saying I'm great at it, but it really did change the way that I thought about playing, and it took 10 minutes. And I really think I'm a better keyboard player for that, that tiny bit of information that I didn't have because I hadn't taken piano lessons since, 6th grade.
Well, most wouldn't tell you this because they're not advanced enough in general. And more to the point, they just want you to play the right notes or whatever the hell.
Yeah, Mrs. Cleveland was great, but she probably didn't know that.
Right. So I think that's exactly what you described. A basic, it's like imagining, I don't know, it's so easy if you think, well, I've created an art app on the iPad and now, but I'd never picked up a paintbrush.
Right, and that's a very physical form as well that people, I think people look at the end result of these things, they hear the end result of these things, and X, Y, and Z things sound similar enough to them because maybe they don't have the most sensitive ears. But, if you really start to watch great pianists or great keyboard players of any kind with this in mind, what you realize is, they're not, for example, just using their fingers. That's not even remotely what they're doing. In fact, their fingers don't necessarily move that much at all. I mean, they do, but they don't. Like, not the way that mine were. It's just it's an absolutely different physical approach than I was taking, and it does offer a lot more control. It's also kind of hard to control if you don't know what you're doing because, for example, playing quietly with that much force is very, very hard because you have to really push into the keys to do what you were saying. Anyway, I think is that something you think you could, do you have to be in person with someone to teach them that? Like, could you, not suggesting you want to do this, but could you make a 10-minute YouTube video showing people what you showed me?
Maybe. I have to really think about that because you have to feel it. And when I was doing that with you, I was, touching your arm and there's a lot of weight that goes on. There's a lot of resistance and weight. And anyway, I'm not sure because, you can demonstrate it, but it'll just look pretty. It'll look beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? But I'm not sure.
Yeah. Pianists demonstrate it every day and none of us do that. So,
and lots of people do it different ways. That's another thing. And everybody has their own, skills with this stuff. Like Jordan Rudess, I have nothing positive to say really about. He's a legend. He's a technician this way. It's like an organist. I would never want to hear him play a piano, and I know he has. And when I guess I have heard him do it, and it's he doesn't know what he's doing there. That's okay. I should say he has developed technique that serves him in other ways that is really extraordinary. It's an extraordinary technique, but it achieves a certain kind of thing and then leaves out a lot of other things. And
virtuosity without expressivity, and I think that's pretty common in virtuosos. Like, we'll call them your middle grade virtuosos.
Yeah, well, it's impressive.
Your lang.
It's a certain kind of thing, and there's nothing wrong with it. I guess I shouldn't be casting dispersion. I have a different feeling. For me, I want to do something different with my playing. So whatever, it's not for me. Let me say it that way. But I would give up all the technical agility to make a beautiful singing tone
which ironically requires just an insane amount of technical agility. Actually.
Different kind, yeah.
Yeah, different kind.
And then
And
then when you play these guys, like I say, these old instruments here, I'm learning that it takes a very different thing altogether. And
it's more like playing a harpsichord, right?
A harpsichord with all kinds of legato. This is what I was talking about before. The way that things connect and then the release and the retrigger stuff is how you get stuff to ring out. Look, harpsichords don't do that. So it's really weird. It's like I don't know. It's not like anything else. And that is a good thing. That is why I like learning. Now, I also have a Quantum Mark II, which is the most advanced FITAR, polyafter touch keybed. And I guess there are more now, the Osmos and the Polybrute. So there are different ones there. And I haven't played a Polybrute, the new Polybrute 12. I'm curious. I would certainly love to do it. And, for those who don't know, it has all sorts of ways of measuring the position of the key and the speed between positions in the key. So you get a lot more expressivity. I do know that almost everyone who's playing them has no sensitivity to this. It will do magic.
Well, that's an interesting example, though, because if you have that in front of you, like if I have that, so my Super Gemini has a very advanced poly aftertouch keybed.
Yeah.
It's not the Polybrute, it doesn't have quite as much. But what I find is, even though not being a virtuosic pianist, but being a decent pianist, it's actually, I can be way more expressive on it because I don't, you can be expressive on a single key, right? And so over time, it doesn't all have to happen, in that very fast-paced way that, if you're trying to be expressive over multiple keys, there's a technicality there that you have to achieve.
You could say, similar to your steam pipe and the input of the wind controller, You're getting a lot of constant data input on your...
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay. On your Super Gemini, you're getting constant data throughput, which is then changing the sound. And here we are.
This is not a sex toy. This is an electronic wind instrument. For those who can't see, it kind of looks like a sex toy.
Or it could be dual purpose. We don't know.
Could be. I mean, let's not go there. Nope. Anyway, what you can do with this is a controller that I use for the steam pipe, which is a new instrument by Erica Synths. And what you can do with this controller is your keys do what keys do. The notes are made here, but you can also, with your fingers, just like a saxophone or any wind instrument. But you can rotate the instrument like this. You can go up and down. You can go side to side. You can shake it. So these are all different,
Don't forget wind.
Different. Yeah, and of course, how much wind you're actually putting in through the thing and the power of your breath. So these are all different parameters that you can set in the synthesizer to control different things. And so, however fast my fingers can or can't move on this, I can hold one note and do a lot with that. And so I would say I think that's why most people love Poly Aftertouch so much, is it's it doesn't have quite as much as, that's a very extreme controller in terms of expressivity, the EWI, or this is a Silphio. But the Poly Aftertouch keybed also has that same quality where you don't need that technical dexterity necessarily to do something extraordinarily expressive. And I personally really appreciate that. So I think you can make use of that in a different way without,
For sure.
I can make use of that in a different way than you do.
For sure. I think a lot of people do this, and the sound designers I was talking about do this. Oh, yeah. What's a little bit lacking here, though, is maybe with the Osmos or the Polybrute 12, is that there are hundreds of years of keyboard technique that exists to do all of these things so that someone like Jean Rondeau can play a harpsichord and make it sound like it has deep levels of dynamics, and it doesn't.
Listener, if you are not familiar with Jean Rondeau, just look him up on YouTube and watch him play and listen to what he can do. And he's one of the greatest. I think he's one of the greatest performers of our time right now. Like, he's one of the best people I've heard.
He doesn't know it, but he's my boyfriend, actually. So.
Oh,
because
sweet.
But
he's my boyfriend too. I bet he's unbelievable.
He's a virtuoso in the sense. But what I'm getting at is all of those hundreds of years of technique result in someone who can do these things. Just imagine if there's got to be a depth of development there that could come from keyboard. For as many people who want to throw that all away and think it's old fashioned, boy, okay, do it. Go for it. Go on with your bad self. But there's a lot to be gained by going deeper into these things.
Well, this kind of brings it back around, to where we started a little bit, which is, how to set yourself up to make the kind of music that you want to make.
And embracing who you are.
Yeah, embrace who you are, embrace what you can do, but also push yourself. And I think that's another topic I would really like to discuss maybe next time around is, there's such a push, and this, I'll not go on a tangent right here at the end of the episode too far, but there's been a real push for convenience, and convenience has become like a very great good in our society. And
equalizing access. That's
we call it democratizing, equalizing access to technologies in particular. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those great goods are also the way that corporations selling all these things make the most money. And I think we're losing something when we accept that convenience is the greatest good that we have, right? That if we can make something faster or more efficient, that's the way we should do that. And that's something that's taken me a long time to come to because I'm extremely efficiency prone. I'm extremely convenience prone. So to me, like, Ableton Live is like the ultimate in a way because it's so fast, right? You make music so fast with something like that. For somebody like me, who's just a quick improviser, I can throw down ideas so fast and have something, right? And it sounds like music. But does it really give me this time and space and attention that I need to make something that I consider great? And the answer is it does not. And that's why I'm not using it. It just doesn't. And I think that, that's true in performing for sure. When you can get a Super Gemini, and sit at this is one of the greatest synthesizers. It's probably going to be a classic, great polysynth. It's unbelievable. I feel so privileged and lucky to have one in my studio. But, there's a danger there, right? Because you can just push a key down and sound like a fucking genius, right? Just because the people who created that sound, it can trick you. It can trick you into forgetting that, I'm a musician and I want to invest myself into this. I don't want to just like grab the tool, hit go, and make something. I need to be who I am, right? I don't want to be who the tool thinks I am.
Grab that amazing LFO shigbity doobie and then you press and you're doing all the poly after touch and you sound like a genius, as you say. And what you're really doing is just activating what somebody else has set up for you. That's not your music, really. Could you put it into a context? Yeah, and that becomes yours-ish.
Yeah.
But is that what you were after? Is that who you are? Is that your humanity?
Is that your humanity? Yeah, and I think there's a balance, as there is with all things, and there's something really beautiful about having an instrument that sounds incredible just immediately when you touch it. A great piano is the same. A child can walk up to a big Bösendorfer on a gorgeous concert hall stage, touch one key, and it sounds beautiful, right? The sound itself is beautiful. Greg's looking like he doesn't agree with me for this.
I know what you mean. Sure.
But they're not making music with that. And sometimes I feel like, that is easy to fall into. I just grab the tool. It's already great. I
think a lot of people who
on the Tempest and it sounds badass.
A lot of folks who chase gear are doing this. They're looking for that thing that's going to make them sound whatever. And that's absolutely the wrong way around. I think that's a great place to wrap up because that's such a great topic for next time.
Another day. Yeah.
For another day. All right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Well, beautiful. Yeah, these are our chats. This is what we do. We do this usually in private, so it's good that we're actually doing it in public.
Yeah, we have these conversations all the time, and we hope that number one, we're not too inside baseball. We probably are. But number two, that some of these things can be useful for others to think through these same things that lots of musicians are going through.
At least as AI, food.
Yeah,
just feed the beast.
Just let the AI take this and do what it will. Give it away for free. That's, again, a topic for another day. All right, everybody.
All right.
Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will be back at you with another episode probably in less than a year. We'll see.
All right. Bye.
All right, everybody. See ya.